We've been looking into what could possibly be in the suspect's background that might have contributed.
Right.
We've been mining court records, looking at family court, justice court, district court, federal court. We did find something interesting in district court. Stephen Paddock, who's the shooter, he sued the Cosmopolitan for a slip and fall where he claims to have been injured. This was back on October 30th of 2011 when he was a guest at the hotel. He says that as he walked from a sundry shop off of a hotel corridor, he took 15 or 20 steps and then apparently fell in some liquid that he claimed had been spilled on the floor by an unknown source. Records show that Paddock was en route to the high-limit gambling area in the hotel when he fell. As a result of the fall, he allegedly tore his hamstring and sprained his right hand and wrist. He also claimed his blood pressure was elevated due to the trauma and that he racked up more than $32,000 in medical bills. That was following the accident, according to his case. The case did go to arbitration on July 31st of 2014, and as a part of that arbitration, the Cosmopolitan showed video of Mr. Paddock's fall. We're trying to see, of course, if we can get that, if it still exists. But the arbitrator said that in the video, it did appear that Paddock slipped in some substance, but the video showed an employee and about 20 other customers walking through the exact same area immediately before he fell, and no one appeared to notice anything. Paddock testified, and I'm using an exact quote here, that there's no way you are going to see liquid on the floor, but the arbitrator ruled against Paddock and ruled in favor of the Cosmopolitan. Something else we learned as we were researching this particular district court case is that sources in the legal community familiar with the case say Paddock was a known gambler who frequented many Las Vegas properties. And we are learning from those sources that over the last few days, he's rumored to have lost a lot of money playing video poker. There's no way to tell, of course, if that contributed to his motive for the shooting, but it could be a factor in his mindset. So that's what we're learning as far as what's in court records. Not a whole lot of really nothing else on him except for this case and that history of him being a known gambler. But Todd and Dana, there's a lot of other things that we've been looking at in the process of what we're trying to learn. We do have messages out to a local firearms expert to see if we can learn a little bit more about what type of firepower would be used to cause the horrible destruction that was caused last night. But we're waiting for more details from police on the type of weapons, the amount of weapons, whether he had permits for these weapons, whether any of them had been illegally modified, for example. And that's stuff that we're still, of course, going to be waiting for law enforcement to share with us. Some other things that we're looking at: is it realistic for hotels to change security policies, to screen baggage? Of course, when you've got people coming and going, they check in once, they leave, they go shopping perhaps, they come back. Right. Very difficult to get a handle on whether it's even realistic to do some additional security when it comes to what people come and go with. But those are questions that, of course, everybody's going to be asking.
And unlike the airport that we're probably most familiar with, that has a controlled entry point, we're talking about these casinos and hotels that have multiple entry points, and so it's hard to fathom going forward how something like that would be possible. But obviously, that's a question a lot of people are going to be asking.
Yeah. And once you come and go, and of course you get your room key, you know, there's really no good way to track or trace people unless you start doing screening every time they walk in, try to go into an elevator or a stairwell, that kind of thing. So very difficult situation for the hotel, not only Mandalay Bay, but other hotels that are going to be looking at this as to whether there's anything they can do. And let me tell you a little bit more about what we've been doing today. I am in touch with multiple witnesses. I spoke to a local mother earlier this morning who was right in front of the stage as the shooting started. She says that she and those around her at first thought it was part of the show, but she was so close she was able to see the reaction on Jason Aldean's face as the realization set in on stage that something was wrong. She then said everything went dark. People started fleeing on the stage, off the stage. She was in tears telling me that a woman right next to her had been shot in the chest. And she is struggling with the guilt that she feels over surviving, mixed, of course, with the blessing. It's hard for me to talk about this, but she can still hug her 8-year-old son today. She's there for him. She praised the first responders for literally using their bodies to shield people, for covering them with their arms and shielding them. We're hoping to talk with that mother later this afternoon when she's had a chance to decompress and be with her family a little bit. And on another note completely, where there are human victims, as we all know from the hurricanes, there are also potentially animal victims that are affected and associated with traumatic events like this. Local rescue groups, as of this morning, set up a special Facebook page to help the animals of any of the victims, to make sure that they're fed and that they're cared for. There is already a posting on that Facebook page about a lost French bulldog puppy. Her name is Roulette. She was with her owners at the country festival last night. They had a concession stand there. She got lost in the commotion. This group is trying to find anyone who might have picked her up and could potentially reunite her with the owners. The group, we've learned, is also right now sending therapy dogs to the convention center to help people there. So there's so many different aspects and elements of this event that we are looking at and we are working on, not only with the victims and the witnesses, but of course also, you know, to see whether that peek that we found through district court into Stephen Paddock's history with this case against the Cosmopolitan and his gambling might have played a role leading up to the events of last night.
Definitely shed more light on that, because the only thing we knew is that he enjoyed gambling, but you're sort of adding to the fact that he was a high stakes, essentially a high roller gambler, and that also indications are that recently, as assuming when he checked in this Thursday, might have lost a lot of money.
On video poker, we're told, is what he was playing, and the sources in the legal community that we are speaking to familiar with this case say that he did lose a substantial amount of money in the last few days. Whether that happened at Mandalay Bay or at other properties, we do not have that information, just that he's well known in the resort corridor and had been gambling over the last few days, as had been his custom in the past, as we know, documented in court records going back to 2011. When he was approaching the high limit gambling area in the Cosmopolitan during his stay there. And
that was the slip and fall case then in 2011.
That he claimed, but again lost that case in arbitration. And if it's at all possible, we will try to come up with the video that was used in that case if it still exists and share that with our viewers if it's available.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if it was something that was planned or something that unfolded as the weekend went on. Maybe it was a festival, a country music festival that he was staring at all weekend from his window and decided to contrive this plan. I don't know,
right.
But it does make it a little bit, we were so, we didn't have a lot of facts and we didn't have a lot on his background, and everyone was just scratching their head going, well, why would someone do this and what was the motive? But we don't know if the gambling is a motive.
We don't know, but certainly shed some light on a state of mind, that is to say the least.
Yeah, interesting, because prior to us coming up with this case, you know, you heard Sheriff Lombardo say there was nothing in local records, state records, federal records. He didn't have a criminal history. He didn't have a military background. His family said, of course, that, you know, he wasn't a gun aficionado and had given them no indication that there was anything wrong. So it was a very gray area, and now we're just at least getting a little bit of context.
But you're so right when you talk about, because people say, well, how did he get all that in there? But you're so right when you really think about it. People can come and go with luggage, cases, anything throughout, even all at once. They pile them up on those carts and push them up into the hotel rooms. People come from all over the world, and sometimes they have a lot of luggage with them. So it is something that I guess is a freedom to come and go as tourists. And you wonder, like you said, you look into if that could possibly change. I know when I was at the Park Theater for a comedy show, we had to go through security. We had to hand in our cell phones. They had to go in little baggies, and the process to get in was much longer and an inconvenience for a lot of people. So it'll be interesting to see if things need to change, have to change, or will change.
Or can they change?
Can they change?
Is it even realistic? Is it possible to provide the type of security and the type of screening that could have prevented or presented some indication of what was going on here?
Yeah, I think about it, just, you know, we're sort of talking about going forward how things could possibly change, and we talked about going through metal detectors and things of that nature, and that is really complex and difficult. You know, just one thought I had is that, you know, if he checked in on Thursday, what was he doing? Did anyone else have access? Did he have maid service? And if not, I don't know, is a possibility of having mandatory room checks? Is that something that would even be considered here in Las Vegas? I don't know.
Unless everything was in a bag. zipped up. I guess the maids don't open those up. I don't know.
I don't know.
Clearly not. You do have a lot of privacy protections, especially as a paying guest at a hotel. So to imagine that something like that could change at such a dramatic level, it's quite hard to fathom.
And the other thing that you're looking into for us, thank you so much for your time and information. You've been great in sort of uncovering this information. The weapon here that we're hearing, we heard earlier ABC News Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross describe it as being fully automatic weapons that he thinks are very, very difficult to sort of get your hands on, even in the black market. That is something that you're also looking to explore and try and get answers there.
And Metro is looking to ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms federal folks, to shed some light on that and to help them out looking at the weapons, the types, whether they were modified, if he had permits for these weapons, or if they were illegally obtained, because there are a lot of questions there. And if they were modified to be even more deadly than they were originally intended, of course that's gonna come into play. You know, where was he able to do that if that's the case, and who had knowledge of it, who made the modifications. You know, we're hoping, as I said, to get a firearms expert to talk with us, but we do want to get some more details from authorities before we take that next step.
Right. Like just as I had started mentioning about online, all the conversations about gun control have already kicked up this morning, which, you know, we'll get into it another time. But
that always comes as the result of and in reaction to a situation like this, and it's awful for us to have these conversations, and that there so far hasn't appeared to be a good solution.
No, I mean, you know, I was talking about a tweet that I'd read earlier, and someone put it this very succinctly, that, you know, I'm putting the numbers here together. We have one person who has shot close to 600 people in the matter of minutes. And you think about the type of weapon that can do that.
And that they exist and that we have access to them in this country, whether legally or illegally, it's out there. So there are a lot of conversations to be had, and it shouldn't have to happen on the backs of victims, but often from tragedy, you know, our solutions are born.
Yeah. All right, Darcy Spears, thank you so much. I know you have a busy day ahead of you, but thank you for sort of updating us about where things stand and what you're looking into. A lot of great insight. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. We'll be back with more.
Okay. All right, we want to get right now, we understand we have on the phone someone who was shot. I'm sorry, I don't have a name. Who?
Anthony.
Anthony. Okay, Anthony, are you there with us?